carousel there. I think somebody, one at least, if not, I mean, I think in a dream world you could separate yourself from two, but you almost have to move one. And one of the little things that I think is never talked about in December, but we'll all be looking at each other if we get to June, and this is a problem. But there's not very many guys on the position player side of this roster as it stands right now that has any options left. Or worse yet, guys who have options that you could consider moving to the minor leagues if you needed to. I mean, you can't option David Murphy to AAA. You can't option Ryan Rayburn to AAA. You can cut them and part ways, but you're going to have to eat their salary. And as you know, the Dolans are not big on eating salary, and
right.
So their roster in some ways is a little landlocked right now because, I mean, if and when the day comes, there's a gigantic faction of people out there who don't want to trade Jose Ramirez, and that's probably a show in itself, in my opinion. But Jose Ramirez is one of the few guys that can go back to AAA, and I'm not sure, even if he is on the roster, that's a guy that you're going to necessarily want to move off the roster to bring help to your roster. You're not necessarily getting better that way. So moving somebody out of that, that right field, first base carousel there, I think they are working hard on trying to do. And as crazy as it sounds, I really think, for all the people who have panicked and feel like the Indians haven't made moves, I feel like there's a move coming, and that kind of goes back to your comment of, not being happy with the roster. If they go to spring training with what they have, I will agree with you. I'm not happy, but I think there's a lot of things that have played out around baseball that work to the Indians' benefit. There are teams who set out with a number one goal who still haven't achieved it. And the Indians have stuff to offer them. I continue to go back to the Mets and their dying need for a shortstop. That was goal number one. Well, they still don't have one. The Giants have been chasing every third baseman in the world, and they still don't have one. I mean, I have to think there's a deal possible with the Indians where, maybe Lonnie Chisenhall becomes a piece. I don't think, unless you're Lonnie Chisenhall's dad, I don't know that anybody sets out at the beginning of the winter and says, who we need to make us a winner in 2015? Lonnie Chisenhall. But after you've missed on Pablo Sandoval and Chase Headley
right.
and Hanley Ramirez, you've missed on all of those guys, and then you start looking at those, tier 2, tier 3 guys, and all of a sudden Lonnie Chisenhall doesn't look so bad. And the same
right.
for Jose Ramirez. The Mets have I think dreamed for a couple years now of getting Starlin Castro from the Cubs. The Cubs have no interest in it, or they're asking for the moon and the stars, or both. Well, as far as I know, they're still going to have a shortstop come opening day, and they're going to have to start considering some alternate plans. And that's where I think, the Indians, as the winter carries on, they have pieces that teams are going to consider or settle for. And even their outfield situation. I mean, the Baltimore Orioles are looking for 2 outfielders. Again, I don't think anybody's setting out saying, who we need, David Murphy. But as the calendar turns to January and we become, we're 8 weeks, closing in on 6 weeks from spring training, all of a sudden, David Murphy becomes better than your green, not ready AA or AAA prospect. And as crazy as it sounds, that's the exact kind of scenario, I think, where you can talk an organization into maybe even taking a contract like Nick Swisher or Michael Bourne.
Right, exactly. I mean, you kind of echoed what I've said. You still got a lot of guys that haven't even come off the market yet. Once those teams lose their plan A, then they start scrambling because now they have holes to fill. And like you said, and not even just looking at their own prospects, but once the first tier of free agents, as you were saying, comes off, then all of a sudden that next tier of free agents, you go, man. Like you said, David Mert, well, he's a lot better than any of these other guys that I'm going to pay twice as much to come in here and do the same thing. Hey, Cleveland, let's talk again about some of this stuff. I agree. And I think that a lot of that has to shake out. Speaking of, I just saw earlier during the show here, haven't brought it up yet, waiting for you. Kansas City looks to have addressed the void in the rotation that's going to come with them not apparently keeping James Shields. Edson Volquez goes 2 years, $20 million to the Royals, adds to Rios and Morales as the Central continues to be clearly the most active division in baseball. Every team, seems like every day, one of the teams, including the Indians, have made a move or multiple moves.
Yeah, we'll see how the Central shakes out. I feel like the Central is going to become the most overrated division in baseball after
I think it's going to be competitive, man.
After being labeled, one of the worst divisions for a long time, I feel like there's a lot of, I don't know about bad signings. There's a lot of old acquisitions being made so far. I'm
True.
I'm not excited by what a lot of teams have done in the division, and that includes the Indians. They've made some popular moves, but Adam LaRoche is 35. David Robertson's a nice closer who's only closed for 1 year, and if your team doesn't win the first 8 innings, he's pretty much obsolete. I think the value of a closer in a lot of teams is changing. I do like Melky Cabrera, the signing that the White Sox have made. They're definitely better, but I'm not sure that they're all of a sudden this favorite to win the division. And I think
says
the Tigers
that?
Are
there people saying that? Are there people putting Chicago
I don't
up
think
there?
people have labeled them the favorite.
Okay.
But people think they're a contender. I've heard people say that they think it's a 4-way race now. I'm like,
no, they're still below. You know what?
I'm not sure. It might be a race, but I kind of feel like it's going to be a really slow race.
You know what, Jeff?
A lot of old guys.
Mike, Jeff Gorman said the other day, the one thing when you look at the moves these teams have made, kind of echoing and backing up what you said, is not only that, but the other teams are all, they've made signings or trades, but a lot of them have been to replace things that have been going out. Whereas while you may not be blown away by the moves that the Indians have done, they have not lost a lot going out. They're bolstering, however you think they're bolstering it. They're adding to what they had, whereas the other teams are replacing and not just adding, which is a good point as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like you said, love or hate the Indians' moves or anywhere in between. They're definitely trying to make their roster better.
Right.
I made the analogy, and it's probably a weak one, but I always thought in the 90s, John Hart built the Indians, and the team that everyone relates to and everyone remembers is the 95 team. And if you drew the line at 95, every player from that team left. And when they left, they replaced them with like an 80% facsimile of that player. Albert Bell left, you replaced them with Matt Williams. Yep. Manny Ramirez left, you replaced him with Juan Gonzalez. I feel like that's what the Tigers and Royals are doing right now. They had good teams, and you see a little part in piece leave, and they're replacing it with somebody who's almost as good. And a bunch of guys who are almost as good usually result in the team not being very good. And, the Royals built their team on pitching and defense, and, they're signing old guys left and right.
Rios and Morales.
Henrik Morales was a great signing in 2008, and the same for Alex Rios. And, those are just moves that don't make me say, oh, the Royals are still going to be right where they were. And even Edson Volquez, I don't think he's the same quality of pitcher as James Shields, and I also think the Royals are doing exactly what the Indians did a year ago, and they're banking on Yordano Ventura to become their ace. And when the Indians said, "Don't worry about Ubaldo leaving, we've got Danny Salazar. Just take those names out, put in James Shields, and put in Yordano Ventura." And I haven't looked it up, but I guarantee they used Yordano Ventura more than any other year in his career as a professional, and rightfully so. I mean, if you've got a chance to win it, you go for it. But don't be surprised if that guy struggles this year because he was overused, and don't be surprised if he tires out. I mean, it's just natural, and they're putting their eggs in his basket, and just don't be surprised if June comes and the Royals have a lot of mediocre old guys being asked to contribute and hold this team together.
That's the one thing I've noticed about what the Royals have done. I get it, and I get statistically going, okay, we're plugging in this, plugging in that, but you nailed it when you said that's a team built on. I mean, there's the whole thing that everybody fell in love. Oh man, they run all over the place. They'll run out the park. They're this fast, young team or whatever. But you got a couple of 30s. I'm not trying to. I'm 30s myself, but there's a difference, and you get up there, and then how do you? It doesn't fit. You know what I mean? It's like having a whole bunch of young guys in the office, and then them one or two guys that are well, we used to do it in reel to reel back in my day. Well, brother, everything's digital now, so I appreciate the story, but you got to get with it, and if you can't run with us, I mean, I can just see some
breakdowns. Morales is not digital. I don't even know if he's analog.
He's reel to reel.
Closer to abacus.
He's reel to reel, brother. You're gluing the tape and the stuff back together like they did. I've heard the stories from the guys in radio before me. Let me tell you, son, used to have to sit with a grease pencil, and we used to have to mark the tape and cut it and play it live. And I'm like, hey, that is impossible. You have got my respect for sure. Thank goodness that I've got Adobe Audition here, and I can cut this up like that, man. But anyways, point being is there's going to be a lot of oil leaking, and that's going to be a lot of fun on this end to watch them try to plug some of those older legs into that style that they try to play. But hey man, it's interesting to see. It'll be funny. Let's see what happens as things roll on, Mike. I know we're up against it here, but we'll see. A lot of things to talk about after Christmas. I don't know what next week's going to be. We'll figure it out off the air. I've been telling everybody that. I'm like, I have no clue. I don't know if we're going to get a chance to catch up next week or not. So if we don't, we'll do it on the backside there. And if not, of course, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, all of that stuff to you and your family and from us here on the show. And we'll see if Santa brings Indians fans anything before Christmas or not here. But either way, man, again, nothing, as you say, I always quote you with the move the needle, nothing that moves the needle. But I do think they're a slightly better team than they were at the end of the season. Take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, I think they're better too. And I think talking too much about where the roster is in terms of spring training in December is unfair because, I think we're only halfway there or maybe just past the halfway point, and there's a lot of things that can still happen. And like I said, I mean, I remember a conversation where, I said, I think there's a strong likelihood that somebody, Trevor Bauer or Lonnie Chisenhall, I think maybe I said as a wild card, Carlos Santana, I would be surprised if all three of them are on the roster. Well, they're all still here, which means, there's still time for things to unfold. And I still think, Santana's a wild card and a stretch. But, the other two guys, I mean, if anything, the Gavin Floyd signing, I mean, I think does open the door where if you can make a big deal and they are insistent on a starting pitcher, you can make it now and not feel too thin. And the same goes for Chisenhall. I mean, they've given themselves options to kind of execute, I guess, the second half of the winter. So I think the Indians are always more aggressive in the second half. So let's see what unfolds in the meantime.
Yep, and we'll talk about it because that's what we do, my friend. Hey, as I said, if we don't catch up before then, happy holidays, Merry Christmas. I don't just do the happy holidays thing, and either way, we'll catch up at some point here next week or the week after. But always a great time having you here, and again, Merry Christmas from me and from all these guys listening to us here every week talk Indians baseball. I'm telling you, man, I got some messages blowing up like, "Hey, man, hats off to you for talking baseball." Like, well, what else are we gonna do? You know, I mean. You got if you're going to be different.
You could go another hour on Johnny Manziel.